Hey, friends, welcome to episode 471 of the My 123 Cents podcast. It is Cyber Monday, and it's also the last day, if you're listening to this on Monday, of the Pro Wrestling Tees Black Friday sale, which is extended for about 10 days. But cheap plug here, I am wearing the Mondo 316 shirt. So if you do go to prowrestlingtees.com/my 123 cents before noon Central Time on Monday, November 27th, you will save 20% on your order. I also want to plug Chattin' with Hatton. It is the new Tyler Hatton podcast, and I was his first guest. That dropped over the weekend on Friday, so be sure to check that out on Spotify. And I think we're working on getting some of the details worked out as getting it onto other podcasting apps, so check that out for sure. And last but not least, the My 123 Cents action figure drive is well underway. You can drop off at Castle Perilous in Carbondale, Illinois. You can Venmo at Kevin-Hunsperger on Venmo, or send me a message and we can discuss options, including one that my friend and guest this week, Chad Smart, has decided to use this year. And he is shipping them old-fashioned style here to the house in Carterville, Illinois. Chad, welcome back to the show.
Welcome, and I'm double multitasking. So if you put this
You're
up on
good.
the video version, it might be horribly entertaining or not entertaining, I should say, for the people watching, as opposed to being entertaining for the people that are just listening. So
Of course, of course. So we're talking about a little bit about the toy drive here, and I know
yeah,
last year you had sent some WWE figures and some AEW figures, and the WWE figures, go figure, got here first. So they beat AEW. I'm kidding, but they did get. So I actually have some from last year
yeah.
that are going into the drive for this year. So thank you again for that, and always being a good supporter of this project.
You're welcome. This is going to be part one of, I'm sure, many parts in this series called Old Man Yells at Clouds, which I think it should just be a podcast we should do from now on.
There you
But
go.
I just, correct me if I'm wrong, but when you and I were kids and the LJN figures came out,
Mm-hmm.
weren't they $5, $6 a piece?
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah, yeah.
Yeah. And now you go to buy a figure and it's 25, 30. I mean, the gobbledygooker Undertaker 2-pack is like $80.
Yes.
It's like, and even I was going to use AEW's Black Friday sale where you got
Mm-hmm.
50% off figures, but that's still $12.50, $13 a piece for one figure.
Wow.
I just don't see where these kids today are playing with action figures that, um, the way we did as kids, and even not even wrestling figures, but granted, it was at a comic book store, so the action figures weren't, the mass produced popular things, but they had Simpsons Treehouse of Horror by the company Reflections, which makes a lot
Mm-hmm.
of, you know, uh, older remodels figures. And yeah, for a basic action figure that does nothing, it was $25. I'm just like,
Wow.
you people, I don't know. I guess that's where most action figures are for collectors now. They're not for the kids.
I,
And that's,
that, yes,
where they,
that's what I was about to say.
because I also don't understand why they come with, multiple hands and multiple heads. And I'm like, I, I, I would lose, those would be lost within 5 minutes if
Right.
I was playing with them. So
Exactly. Well, and that's the thing with like the Gobbledygooker Undertaker 2-pack, which again over my shoulder is Gobbledygooker, and they actually Amazon just put those on sale, and I it was significantly cheaper. But here was my little. I don't think I told this story when I did the unboxing, but I got the 2-pack. Obviously, it was $80, like you said, and then I had a $25 Amazon gift card that I'd gotten from my boss last year for Christmas. So I used that. And then I ended up selling the Undertaker for 40 or $45. And so I ended up paying, I think, 17 or $18 for the Gobbledygooker figure. So I ended up looking at that as a win. But You're right. I was at Kmart, or Kmart, I wish, Walmart the other day, and even the basics, which is what most people donate when they do for
Mhm.
this drive, the basic WWE figures, that is, they're $11 now, or almost 12, and they used to be like 9 or 10.
Mhm.
Ollie's, I haven't been up to Ollie's yet, but they typically run about $6 or $7 for the basics. But I don't think AEW has a basic line, do they? I think all of theirs are more of the elite, to
Yeah.
compare to the WWE's version of it, or Mattel's version, I suppose.
Yeah. And I guess that's because the AEW fan, and this is something, a discussion I would like to have with you in the future about the presentation of WWE versus WWE versus AEW in regards to who their fans are and what they're
Mm,
targeting. But AEW fans, I think, are more the collector type, not the kids that are playing with them. I could be
yeah.
wrong, but just based on what I see online, I think AEW is more for collectors.
I think that's a fair assessment. Very, very, very well said there. So again, if you want to donate, the deadline is the week of December 11th. I did talk to Toys for Tots a couple weeks ago, and I will be able to take toys and drop them off that week. So be sure again to hit us up, let us know if you are interested in making a donation. And since we were talking about AEW and WWE and all of that good stuff, I was kind of debating on a topic, and my original idea was
Mm.
going to probably be negative. And Chad actually called me. We're recording on Sunday afternoon. Chad called me Sunday morning after Survivor Series, and we were talking. And I was like, you know what? If you're available this afternoon, let's just do a podcast, because I was going to go rogue on old
Hmm.
Ryback and some others, and I decided it's too negative, and I want to be positive, and so
Have you tried to get
uh,
him on the show? Maybe you can talk out your differences.
we can square it up. He's one, and I had forgotten that he had blocked me until you had sent me that tweet about him saying that he was going to retire, and then I went to look to see, and of course I noticed that I was blocked, but not blocked on the My 123 Cents account. So I went and looked at it that way. But um, he and the Honky Tonk Man, and I mean Ryback, I could see, because I probably did make a snarky comment about Ryback at one point. But Honky Tonk Man, I've always been a fan, so I don't know what the beef is there with Honky. But that was going to kind of be the gist of the episode, and talking about my old pal Silas Young and Honky Tonk Man and some of those guys. But again, we're going to go positive. We're going to be more positive, and I've been wanting to do Music Mania, kind of an offshoot of Movie Mania, which I haven't even brought this up yet, Chad. But are you planning to see the Iron Claw movie?
Oh, but yeah, definitely, definitely. I may break my wait for streaming, uh, not philosophy, but the fact that normally I don't go to
Mindset.
the theater. Yeah, mindset. There
Uh-huh.
you go. Yeah, I might go because I hear. I mean, it's getting good reviews so far, um, and who doesn't want to see their scumbag MJF up on the big screen?
Yeah, playing the Von Erich scumbag. That's going to be.
Yeah.
I'm curious, because Bruce Pritchard was talking about it on his podcast from over the
Mm.
weekend, and it reminded me of something that you and Mike DeKalb have talked about on the Out of Touchstone podcast that you guys were doing, um, based on a true story, and you know a true story, or a
Yeah.
biopic. And it seems like this one kind of goes more outside of the maybe what actually happened, and it's more based on actual events and not the actual events as
Events.
they were. So,
Yeah, because
but
I
he said
know
it's
I.
not a wrestling movie, so
Mm.
that might get my wife to go and watch it too.
Mm.
So we'll see.
Oh,
We'll have
you
to wait
mean
and see.
shirtless Zac Efron isn't enough for her?
Probably not, but it might not hurt. So we will hopefully be doing a review of that later in the year here, before we hit. Well, it would have to be probably that Christmas Day
Mm.
episode if we end up seeing it on time. But we'll talk about that later down the road. But Music Mania, I did a little bit with a while back, but I wanted to kind
Mm.
of get into it, and we'll do much more on Music Mania soon. But I didn't want to sit and rehash what happened at Survivor Series, because there are plenty of podcasts and YouTube channels that do that. And you know, to me, I was scrolling through TikTok, and then of course the reels that you see on Facebook and on Instagram. Obviously, Punk is a polarizing individual, and we will talk briefly about it. But I didn't want to dedicate the whole podcast to it. But it's kind of like that elephant in the room. And I did you watch the media press conference after the Survivor Series?
No, I did not, because I've watched a few of the AEW ones, and I know you sent out a tweet or an X about how do you get
Hmm.
credentials for that, and
Yeah,
I would like the same information, because I want to know who's in these. Because thinking back to our youth, whenever WWE would do a news conference,
yeah,
think about like the WrestleMania 7 setup.
yeah.
Uh, you would get reporters K, Fabe, and other non real people in there. It's like grab the office PA and have him ask a question.
Right. Yeah.
So I want to know, who are these people that are in these scrums? Are they asking legitimate questions, or here's my snark, or is it like a Biden press conference where the questions are already pre-selected?
I cannot confirm if the questions are predetermined, but I know Chris Van Vliet, for example,
Mm,
is a big wrestling podcaster, YouTuber, and
yeah.
he has all kinds of guests on his show. And he was a part of that one last night, or at Survivor Series. But I was asking you about that because at the very beginning, Triple H, or they actually refer to him now as Paul Levesque, comes out and says, um, the big return. We're going to talk about it,
Yeah.
yada yada yada, and then he ends up being about R-Truth, which
I
I
did
thought
see
was
that.
pretty funny. And I wondered, part of me was like, I, again, I've never met the man. I don't know anything about CM Punk. I'm indifferent to him being back. I am
Mm,
fine if he's back or if he's not back. I think honestly, it's going to make both sides being Punk and WWE a ton of money, and that it's the
yeah.
wrestling business first and foremost. So I'm putting that aside, and whether I like him or not is irrelevant to the conversation. But I wondered, just based on kind of his supposed pissy personality backstage, if that
Mm,
kind of set him off to get, right off the bat, or
uh,
have they both matured, as Triple H implied in the presser, and they're having some fun, and maybe Punk's a great guy to hang out with and be around. I don't know, but it just seemed like if anybody would be offended by that line, it would have been him. And I was like, oh, interesting way
mm.
to start this thing off.
I think that one he could understand the joke and
Yeah.
get it. I think, thinking about the AEW presser that kind of set the whole downfall of Punk into play.
Hmm.
I think part of it is, and again, like we said, we have no insider information. We don't get invited to these scrums. I was just at Full Gear a week ago. I
Oh
left
yeah.
after the show was over with. I ran into Nigel McGuinness, talked to him for a little bit, but that was as close as I got to a backstage. Um, I did meet CM Punk a few years ago at the NHL All Star Game when he was refereeing the match between the mascots, or the game between the
Oh, okay.
mascots. All I said was hi, snapped a quick photo, and left. So that's my whole interactions with CM Punk.
Yeah.
Um, but it seems like the the AEW presser that set him off, that was after he had, um, I can't remember if that was when he tore his bicep, tricep, or whatever, or something where it was after a match. He was injured, he was
Yeah.
sore. Probably not the best time to be doing a
Right.
presser. And then someone and I don't even remember if someone asked him about Colt Cabana or how that whole thing got brought up. But yeah, I think that's still a sore subject, and I don't think we'll see Scotty Goldman in WWE anytime soon. But yeah, I think as far as last night's presser, and I don't believe Punk came in and talked
I don't
during
think
the
he did. I
presser.
watched for a bit. I watched up through Cody coming out, and
Okay.
I thought if they were gonna, they would have. I would have hoped they would have, kind of led with Punk if they were going
Mm,
to do that, and while people are still engaged and watching, and not have to
yeah.
sit through Gunther and everyone else kind of talking. So
Yeah. I mean,
nothing against Gunther.
and to your point about being indifferent towards Punk, a part of me is watching just for the car crash aspect of it to see, like,
Hmm.
okay, you know, clubbering time. How long is it going to be before something sets him off? And I
Yeah.
want to know, is the doctor that he railed against on Cabana's podcast that ended up suing Punk, does he still work for WWE? I don't
Mm.
know. But again, if they can bring back Randy Orton, I I would rather see CM Punk than Randy Orton. So
Really? Wow.
yeah, because
See,
I don't like
I've
Orton.
changed. I know you don't, and I've changed on Orton. I was kind of in the same camp as you, but the last few years, I don't know. He's grown on me. I don't know what it is, but I
Well,
was
that's
glad to
because
see
he's
him
hanging out
back.
with your bro.
Yes. Remind me when we're done here to ask you something off. I don't want to talk about it on
All
the
right.
stream, but we'll talk about it later.
All right. But yeah, I just you know, real quick, I think going forward, it's going to be interesting to see where Punk fits into WWE storylines.
Yeah.
Because as we were discussing before we started recording, you look at if he's going to be on Raw, you've got Seth, Cody, main event Jey Uso. Gunther should be moving, or Gunther's on SmackDown, I guess. Um, Sami Zayn, Drew McIntyre, Judgment Day. You've got these guys that are up there,
Yeah.
top of the card. Is Punk going to be okay coming in and not being the focus?
Yeah. Will he be? And we don't. As of this recording, at least, there were no details released about a contract. If he's going to be a long term thing, if this is going
Mm-hmm.
to be something to kind of bridge us through WrestleMania season. But this time of year, Tyler said it best on social media uh, after this all kind of went down. This time of year really is a great time to be a wrestling fan. I think I just love the Survivor Series from back in '87. Even I'm not a big fan of not having the elimination matches, but I get the war games, and I
Mm-hmm.
know they've neutered it and tweaked it and made it more WWE style than it was when it was in JCP. But I love this season, and then the Royal Rumble is besides WrestleMania, the Royal Rumble is my favorite event. So, and it's a crapshoot now. I mean, you've got so many different possibilities of a
Mm-hmm.
Royal Rumble winner now. Not that just Punk coming in has changed that, but even before, I remember a few, maybe 10 or 12 years ago, it was pretty predictable. The Rumble
Mm-hmm.
was as far as who was going to win and whatnot. I feel like the last few years, although Cody this past year was kind of a gimme, but I think everyone, it's going to be interesting to see how they do this and work it. And Roman Reigns, of course, is kind of
Yeah.
wasn't anywhere near the Survivor Series last night, and a couple of other people I thought kind of curious by them not being there. LA Knight, he's seemed to be red hot, and
Yeah.
all of a sudden now he's not around. Logan Paul, the new U.S. champion. So it'll be interesting to see kind of where all these other players then start falling into place and how it all works out.
Yeah, I think adding the Raw title that Seth Rollins currently holds does add some intrigue into the title pick, the Royal Rumble winner, because now you have someone who could go
Yeah,
after either champion as opposed to the last couple of years where they had to go after Roman.
yeah,
Um, and yeah, one of the things about Survivor Series too is the whole show, even after the end and then the Punk post show celebration, the show clocked in at 2 hours and 45 minutes roughly.
mm,
So I mean, granted, that's much better than the 7 hour, 8 hour WrestleManias that have been in the past, or even the 5 hour
mm-hmm,
AEW shows. But there's something about when your pay per view or your premium live event is not even as long as your flagship show. That's a little like, okay, you couldn't stretch it out for another 20 minutes and throw on as much as I hate the Raw versus SmackDown mentality of we're fighting for our brand, even though we're going to get, we move back and forth throughout the year. We don't really have an
right,
allegiance. But like you said, there are so many people missing from the show that you couldn't throw on a SmackDown versus Raw elimination match just to,
right,
get some guys on the show, pad out the time a little bit. But because overall, I thought the three individual matches were fine, but nothing premium live
right.
event worthy.
Yeah,
Whereas, yeah.
exactly. I agree. 100% agree with that. I will tell you from watching it actually live and on the TV in the living room and not having to sit on my phone and watch it. My wife appreciated it only being 2 hours and 45 minutes. But, um, I, you know, as we talked about Survivor Series on the phone before we set up for this, I didn't want to focus just solely on Punk's return in on Survivor Series. So I thought, well, let's talk Music Mania. And when you and I were growing up, I remember specifically, and I'm sure you do too, there was a time period where wrestlers came out to the ring to no music. And then as some of them did start coming out to the ring, it was, popular songs on the radio. Junkyard Dog specifically stands out. Another one rides the bus. Another one rides the bus. Another one bites the dust. I got my Weird Al and Queen mixed up there.
Mm,
And then, Hulk Hogan before Real American, which was Barry Windham and Mike Rotundo's song. He was
mhm,
coming out to Eye of the Tiger from Survivor. So there was, and I watched a lot of Dallas wrestling, and so the Von Erichs and everybody
mm,
started coming out at least to some commercialized music, and then Vince McMahon, because I guess the rights fees for music is outrageous.
mhm,
And if you watch the network, a lot of the songs that were like that before have been since replaced with their WWE or WCW theme songs, as they were able to own those rights and
mhm.
whatnot. But were there, and again, I want to talk more about this aspect on another episode, but you know, were there any of those kind of modern songs that were on the radio that you would turn on and hear wrestling, or anything that made you become a fan of the song because it was on wrestling?
Trying to think, even though growing up in the 80s and early 90s, like you said, you got that with a lot of the wrestlers. I think for me, ECW was really the one that probably I associate wrestlers with song. Like I became fans
Mm,
of songs because of the wrestler, more
okay.
so. Obviously, I mean, as a Metallica fan anyway, but Enter Sandman with the Sandman, anytime you hear Sandman now, Enter
Yeah.
Sandman, you want that. Or if you see Sandman wrestling, you want that epic
Yeah.
entrance. Um, and even Rob Van Dam's song Walk by Pantera, which he's now using in AEW again, that introduced me to Pantera. Um,
Hmm.
and I'm trying to think of back in besides Hogan, and I can't remember what song the Freebirds use down in Dallas. Um, I don't know if you remember what song.
I can only remember Bad Street, but I'm sure, yeah, they
Uh,
used something before Bad
yeah,
Street USA.
then they used Freebird. Come on, I'm just setting you up
You
there.
know, oh, maybe they did. Did they? I don't know. Did they?
I thought so. I thought that's. Oh,
They very well could have.
uh,
Sorry,
uh,
this isn't water, so no, I'm
oh,
kidding. I'm kidding.
uh, yeah, and I'm trying to remember because then I remember the wrestling album and Pile Driver and
Mhm.
those songs being used for the main guys,
Right,
and I'm trying
right.
to think of WCW other than Flair using the 2001 theme song. What? I'm trying to think if they use like what did Dusty Rhodes use or the Horsemen or
I don't think the Horsemen had music, but I feel like Dusty Rhodes came out to like some kind of working man kind of song. I can't remember what it was though, but I
yeah,
feel like maybe he had something. But again, I don't remember much of those guys coming out to stuff. Now, one of the other podcasts that I listen to, they're doing it's OBP, Our Vantage Point, and they're doing weekly. They're watching every week from they started in 1982. They're in
mm,
1986 now,
mm,
and early Adrian Adonis, early adorable Adrian Adonis, because they're watching this off of YouTube feed, they're not watching it off of the network. He came out to "You're So Vain" by Carly Simon, which
mm,
I had no recollection of that. So,
uh,
but it was only a handful of times. But yeah, I remember a lot of the guys would come out, and I want to do a whole episode on Phil Collins because I feel like for a minute there was a big Phil Collins WWE connection, and we'll save that for a future Music Mania. But
all right.
those were some that stood out to me that I remember. Um, but obviously, I think WWE, because it was so big at the time, one, it only made sense then that they start, with the vision that Vince McMahon had, that they start
Yeah,
producing their own music and whatnot. But then also everybody had their eyes on them, so it was easier for a Paul Heyman in
yeah,
ECW or Fritz Von Erich in Dallas or whatever. Those smaller promotions could kind of get away with using the commercialized music, but nowadays it's.
it's not
In fact, I won't be playing any music clips on this for the YouTube portion of it because it'll get dinged immediately. But
right. And
it
I
is
know
it is very interesting. Yeah.
Yeah, and I know indie promotions too.
Hmm.
if depending on who their distribution deal is with. Like I know, for example, Pro Wrestling Gorilla will use the popular songs as guys come to the ring, but then on the DVD releases, the entrances are cut off because they can't
Yeah.
do that. But yeah, if you're a small promotion that no one's really, I mean, if you go after them, what are you going to get?
Right.
5 cents and the promotion shut down? Like that's not worth.
Yeah. Well, and I had to, when I was doing stuff with Stride, there was somebody who came out to a song, I think by maybe Metallica, or it was a commercialized song. A lot of the guys in Stride had their own, either somebody they knew, somebody that made music, or
Mm.
so it wasn't, or it was generic enough music that it never got dinged. But there were a couple times that the one song would get dinged, and I'd get a warning from YouTube, or a thing from YouTube, you can't post this, or yada yada yada.
Mm.
So I'd have to go in and kind of trim the entrances. So I basically then, because I was like, I'm just gonna across the board cut the entrances off, because yeah, it does become a bit of a headache of you
Mm.
know you know the channel's not monetized. We're making $0 on this, but I get it. The artists want to protect their creative or intellectual properties
Yeah.
and whatnot. So, and honestly, I'm surprised the entrance song for this podcast hasn't been hit,
Mhm.
because it's the Ultimate Warriors theme song with a bunch of sound bites from other wrestlers. So, and I've done that for, this is episode 471. I don't know what episode I started doing that on, but it's
Mm.
been many, many years. But again, nobody's listening, or not. I shouldn't say, I don't mean nobody's listening. The people who would be able to shut it down are not
Yeah.
listening. So
And
please
it's
don't
not getting
report me if you're
yeah.
listening.
It's not getting flagged by the AI algorithm to
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Exactly. So let's talk about Cult of Personality.
mm.
This was a song that came out, I believe, in 1989. So we're both in high school when this song comes out. I remember liking the song back then. It's by Living Color, not to be confused with the show at the same time, In Living Color, with the sketch comedy of Damon Wayans and Keenan Ivory Wayans and his family. But um, were you a fan of the song when it first came out back in the day? Because it was a different, and help me here, because as I'm explaining this, at least from my perspective of remembering it, it didn't, African American music back then. It was Motown. It was the Michael
Mm.
Jackson. It was Lionel Richie. It was Salt and Pepper. It was more either you had either the kind of smooth rocks versions of things, or
Yeah.
you had more of the R&B and rap. And obviously, this was before Snoop Dogg and NWA. NWA, I guess, was starting to come up, but it was either really rap, or some R&B, or
Yeah.
that lighter rock stuff. And Living Color was a bit more, I don't want to say metal, but it fit in a different genre. And help me
Yeah, I
here.
guess you could just say rock.
Yeah.
Yeah, because I think other than maybe Bad Brains, which were a punk band that's very influential in the punk scene, yeah, you didn't have a lot of. I mean, racking my brain, I can only think of like the lead singer of King's X, maybe, and I want to say Phil Lynott of Thin Lizzy. I think he was black as well. I could be wrong. Hopefully, if I am, no one will be offended by that. But yeah, Living Color was really one of the first major rock acts, at least in that era of when like the hair metal scene was really taking off, and they got
Hmm.
really big. And yeah, I mean, I think the song from the first time I heard it, I enjoyed the song. I bought the album or the
Oh, okay.
cassette. I bought Vivid,
Yeah.
um, and uh, and then as they moved on throughout their career, like they are very skilled musicians, and kind of experimented more with more styles and everything. And I didn't know this. I actually just saw Living Color a month and a half ago in concert.
I
They
was going
opened
to
up
say,
for
I thought you
Extreme,
had seen them recently. Yeah.
and apparently the bass player was very influential in the rap scene and helped co-write a
Oh,
lot of early 80s rap songs.
oh wow.
And so they did,
Interesting.
because this was the 50th anniversary of hip hop, they did a couple of those songs in concert. And I would still recommend, they're going back out on tour with Extreme after the new year. If they come to your area, highly recommend it. They are still amazing live. And Corey Glover, the lead singer, his voice is still on point. So, but yeah, getting back to the song Cult of Personality, I think it just, you're talking about your song, your theme song having the sound bites. I think the sound
Hmm.
bites in Cult of Personality helped establish that song as something a little bit more meaningful and deeper than, say, Cherry Pie or,
Yeah,
Slide It In by Whitesnake.
yeah. That's a good point too. And as we were talking earlier about not everybody had theme music, and
Mm,
I feel like as we talk about music mania here and the significance of it, because music is such a part of most people's daily lives, whether you're in the car listening to it, whether it is a part of a podcast that you're listening to, or just flipping through the TV, a commercial
mm,
break, TV show theme songs. Music is such a big part of us, and I think that without it in wrestling, the presentation is completely different, because how many times did we hear that music? And we'll get to punk here in a minute, but you hear that music, that first note or two,
mm.
some of these songs that are so recognizable, and especially if it's someone that's been gone for a while, but you hear that glass break for Stone Cold Steve Austin, and you can go back and look at on the videos of those pops,
Mm.
and it was just such a big part of the presentation. I think sometimes it made the moment seem even more important. I don't know what. I know you're a big fan of music in general too,
Mm.
so I would imagine you kind of feel the same.
Yeah, I mean, you get a Pavlovian dog response because you train people to recognize, and I guess this is part of my problem now with today's uh, wrestling culture and theme songs is that unless it is a popular song
Hmm.
or it has a specific, first few words that come out before the song kicks in, I have no idea who a lot of people are. There's, YouTube channels that do guess the wrestler theme song
Oh yeah, yeah,
every second, and I'm like, anything made after like 2005, I'm like, I got no clue. I don't,
yeah.
and especially like when they can name the title of the song because I'm like, oh, it's on my workout, playlist, or it's I listen to it. I'm like, yeah. Ever since I think WWE the theme Volume 4 was the last wrestling album that I listened to.
Yeah.
So,
Well, and oh, go ahead.
oh, I was gonna say, yeah, I don't. Uh, so I think yes, if you can get a good song that works with the the wrestler, which I think Cult of
Hmm.
Personality works with CM Punk, even because he's had the little cults in his
Yeah.
WWE run, and he is definitely a personality, I guess you could say. So it works for him, and I think these guys going back to the indies that use these songs on the indies level, if they can transition them into WWE, AEW, Impact, um, I think it helps with their overall career because it's like a consistency and it's like you're because I think people have a lot of fear if somebody jumps from the indies to one of the major promotions that they're like, oh, they're especially in WWE sense. Oh, you're gonna, give them a new name, you're gonna change them,
Hmm.
you're gonna water down the presentation. But if you can carry over that theme song, it and the name as well, but it does help to kind of maybe tell the audience, hey, this is still the same person that you have liked on the indies. Now he's just on a bigger stage, and you won't be buying a T-shirt from him at intermission.
I was going to ask you about that next, because it does feel like there are very few examples of where someone, and I know Punk didn't come in immediately to
Mhm,
the Cult of Personality,
mhm,
because I know he was using that prior to coming to WWE. Um, it's interesting though that they picked up on that, and they kind of went all in and rode that wave with Punk for
mhm.
a while there. Um, so much so that and I don't know what he used when he was doing UFC, or if they even do music. That's how little I
Mhm.
know about UFC, if they even come out to music. But um,
Yeah, I think he used another
you know,
one, bites the dust.
that's that's good. That's good. Um, but coming out to when he signed with AEW, and one of the things that Tony Khan did, which
Mm,
credit to Tony Khan on this, because honestly, when and I'm going to backtrack a little bit here, but when, to me, WWE set the standard when it comes to having that, and Jim Johnston and Jimmy Hart and whoever else was creating
Mhm.
that music was so incredible and so iconic. From the Big Boss Man's theme to the tweaked version of Pomp and Circumstance to the Million Dollar Man to Real American, on and on and on. Then you flip to WCW, and they were trying to do this as well with some of the, and I didn't feel like there were, in my opinion, maybe American males, but the WCW music library to me lacked in terms of the original content. Now, when they did Voodoo Child and they got some of those other
Mhm.
commercial hits, and I don't know what the right word, licensed music, and was using
Yeah.
those songs, it helped. And so Tony Khan kind of bringing in, I know he did it for Jungle Boy with whatever the Jungle Life or
Tarzan,
whatever that theme
Tarzan
song
boy.
is.
Yeah.
Yeah, Tarzan Boy. Um, those kinds of moments where you can do that. And I don't feel like you can or should do it with every performer, but when you have those special talents or special songs, I think it dictates it. And I think, again, like I said before, that popped with Punk at Allstate back in 2021, I guess, just a
Mhm.
couple of years ago when he came back. Um, I think the music helped with that. If he would have come out to a different theme song or
Mhm.
something else, obviously everybody knew and was ready for that chord to hit on Cult of Personality.
Mhm. Yeah, oh, definitely that, because you, like you said, a lot of, if you can't recognize the wrestler by the music and you're waiting for them to step through the curtain for the audience to see, but with Cult of Personality, you hear the static and then that first guitar chord.
Hmm.
People know. Um, I find it funny because you mentioned WCW, and yeah, other than because I believe it was Jimmy Hart that was doing a lot of their music
He did,
too,
yes.
and they seem to want to go for knockoffs, like
Yeah.
DDP's theme song was "Smells Like Teen Spirit" with,
Hmm.
like it's kind of like the Vanilla Ice treatment where he's like,
Yeah.
theirs goes dun 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 dun, mine goes dun 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 dun, and it's like,
Yeah.
yeah, that's the same thing. You're just moving it, maybe half a note later, um, but yeah, I mean, and definitely when you get that recognizable moment, but um, I just think that yeah, thinking AEW, like now Orange Cassidy uses Jane by, I want to say, Talking Heads, uh, or the Pretenders, maybe. I don't. Jefferson Starship, Jefferson Airplane, one of the four, one of them. See, I don't know who the song, I don't know who does the song, but I know what the song is, and I know
Right, right.
apparently, and I haven't gone back and watched this to see if it's the reasoning, but I didn't know that Orange Cassidy, the character, is based on Paul Rudd's character in Wet Hot American Summer, or at least in one scene. And I don't know if that
Mm.
song's played in the background and that's why he uses it,
Oh, okay.
but yeah, I think when you have, it's finding that song that can match up to the wrestler, and that
Yeah.
without being like too, I mean, I guess Enter Sandman works, but it's a little too on the nose, where it's
Right.
like,
Yeah.
but
Well, and I think, I think there were a lot of people. I wasn't surprised that Punk came back. I was
mhm,
surprised that he came back at Survivor Series. I told you on the phone earlier. I figured they'd wait until Rumble because they had Randy coming back and it being Cody's first um, War
War
Games. With Dusty's creation. But I don't think Punk's return necessarily eclipsed that, even though that has been kind of the talk. But I don't know that I would have done a podcast this week on Cody being in War Games for the first time or Randy
mhm.
Orton's return, especially with you knowing your feelings for Randy Orton. But
And
um,
Cody.
yeah, I'm glad though that they kept, obviously, licensed and
Mhm.
again, I don't know what they pay for those kinds of things, but and I read somewhere, and I think you and I even joked about it on Snapchat about, did Living Color re-record or redo something with the song this week even?
Yeah, news came out that they had re-recorded it. I don't know if it's like an anniversary of the song. I guess it would have been 25 years, 35 years ago.
35.
Yeah, I wish
We're
it was
old,
25.
brother.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah, I know.
Um, but yeah, they had recorded a new version, which I don't know if that had anything to do with Punk coming back to WWE, or
Hmm.
again, it's the 35th anniversary, so maybe they're doing new versions. And like I said, they're back out on tour. They need
Uh,
music to sell to hype the show. But um, yeah, I'm kind of going to go off on a tangent here. I just think real quick, CM Punk and Bret Hart, are they the same person? Do you think that CM Punk would ever refuse to lose in Chicago?
no, he wouldn't do that, would he? Very possible.
I don't know. It's just odd that those two seem to have a similar, career, not really trajectory, but just similar things. And I know, when he was in AEW teaming with FTR, they were a lot of Bret Hart tributes.
Mm,
But two guys that kind of burned their bridge with WWE, said they would never go back,
yeah.
and they both have now.
Well, and I think we've talked about this before. If it wasn't with you on the podcast, I know we've talked
Mhm.
about it offline, but the the ability to forgive and forget,
Mhm.
and I guess especially when there's all kinds of Benjamins involved. But
Yeah.
how many years did Ultimate Warrior and Bruno San Martino and Bret
Mhm.
Hart, all of those guys harbored resentment, grudges, whatever the case was with Vince McMahon. And I do think that Paul Levesque, Triple H, uh, has been a good ambassador, a good olive branch extender, if you will. Um, I never thought we'd see Bruno go in the Hall of Fame, and I never
Mhm.
thought Warrior would come back into the fold. Um, I am legitimately surprised over the course of the last several months that Punk is back. Um, but again, it's a business, and I think
Mhm.
sometimes fans forget that, and they want to hold on to this animosity, or they want to believe the online reports, and maybe some of them are true. We really still to this day don't know what truly happened
Mhm.
backstage at Wembley Stadium. We
Yeah.
we don't know. We know it was enough though to get Punk fired, and so. Um, but I don't think someone is going to be able to, pull something like that in WWE. And again, that's not or a slam or a knock against AEW. I just think it's a different work environment. It's a
Mhm.
different setup. It's a different management structure. It's whatever it is. And obviously, both parties agreed before all this went down at Survivor Series of how it was going to work out
Mhm.
and how things were going to look. So, but I dig the music when that again, I was about to send out a snarky
Mhm.
tweet about Punk not being there, and tying back into this Ryback thing. But I mean, I literally started pushing buttons to type it out,
Mhm.
and the song hit, and I was like, "You got to be kidding me!"
Yeah.
And you see some of those people over, in my opinion, overreactions. Maybe it's for the views and the clicks and
Mhm.
whatnot, but again, I was legitimately surprised. I said, "Holy shit!" to my dad was here, and we were watching it, and he's like, he doesn't keep up with it, so he didn't know
Mhm.
what the significance of Punk being there was, but I explained it to him. So, to me, it was one of those surprise moments of the year, and we'll see how it plays out. But what were you thinking when you heard the music hit?
Well, again, I watched the show on the replay, and so I guess when Punk showed up, both you and my cousin had sent me a snap in a chat being like, "Hey, are you watching live?" And so I knew something was up.
Hmm.
And then watching the show, they played up Randy Orton wasn't there, which again, hopefully he's being fined for being late to a show. It's one of my pet peeves in wrestling logic, guys not showing up on time. But uh, and then they did the cash in tease, which I think would have been really interesting to figure out how they were going to do that in the
Yeah.
course of the Survivor Series. And then, yeah, and then Randy comes out, and so I'm like, oh, okay, they're just. I think they were, they knew what the audience expected, and they were playing with that expectations. And then
Hmm.
something WWE has done a few times in the past few years, and I think it works, is the show's ending, they throw up the copyright, you think show's over, and then all of a sudden something hits, because it's like if Punk would have just came out after the victory, it still would have got a major pop. But I think by letting the fans be like, he's coming, oh no, he's not. Okay, let's relax. And then
Yeah.
you hit them. You get the maybe the bigger pop and the bigger excitement. So I think that was well done. Um, but yeah, what was your question?
Well, just
Uh,
I don't remember the actual question, but just as you were talking about it, it made me think of something else. Imagine though that Punk just shows up, or they
mm,
pan to him in the crowd. You know, he's
mm,
up in the not the rafters, but he's up in the balcony, or
yeah.
he's watching from the control room. I don't think it has the same. I think people would have popped, but
Mm,
again, I think that music and knowing what that music means is
mhm,
what kind of brings those fans into or brings
yeah.
all fans into that kind of frenzied state.
Yeah, I mean, you can go back a few months when The Rock showed up. I think it was on SmackDown unannounced. I
Yeah,
think it was like when the actor strikes had just
yeah.
kind of started and Cena was coming back. No one expected The Rock to show up. And granted, it didn't lead to anything long term. It's more of the um, just the in-house, like anything can happen basically. So that's why you need to buy
hmm
your ticket and come to the show. But yeah, as soon as if you smell what The Rock is cooking hit over the PA, the crowd went crazy because again, it's that identifiable mark that people
hmm
you can automatically know what's going to happen, and then it's
Yeah.
something that you're not expecting. So you get it, and go ahead.
Oh no, I was
No.
going to ask you as we kind of start to wind things up.
Mhm.
Conversely, because we've seen this happen in the past, specifically the Montreal screw job and the aftermath of that. I
Mhm.
remember Sean being in the ring and calling out Brett, and they played Brett's music, and Brett doesn't show up. And then
Right.
another time, it's a little person dressed up like Bret Hart. So obviously, in these instances where WWE owns that music and owns that
Mhm.
copyright, they can kind of dick around with it and make people think what they want to think.
Mhm.
But you know, had that music hit last night or on Saturday night, and Punk doesn't show up, I mean, there would have been a meltdown. I think of
Yeah.
because then it's like because I can remember back many years ago, it was obviously between now and 2014 when Punk left, but they were in Chicago and the fans were chanting. This was still early in his departure, and there were those rumors,
Mhm.
oh, he's backstage or whatever. And Stephanie was in the ring, and she was heel Stephanie, and she said something like, "You can say his name all you want, he's not here." Um, so sometimes I wonder, and now that Vince is gone, maybe they
Mhm.
don't do that kind of sleight of hand or pull the
Mhm.
curtain out from under or the rug out from under you as much as they used to. But uh, yeah, I think that would have been a disastrous consequence if they would have played the music, hyped it up, and then you know a Gilbert type guy comes
Right.
out instead of Punk. You'd see him Phil or something along those
Yeah.
lines.
I mean, if CP Monk would have came out, I would have been okay
Mm,
with that. But and I still think AEW should
of
have CP
course.
Monk and Colt Cabani come out. But yeah, and I think those type of things do happen. And like you said, it's one thing if it's a storyline and it's a heel in the crowd, you messing with the crowd.
Yeah.
But if it's just the company itself doing it, I think then you risk, as I say, ruining the town or destroying the
Yeah.
town, whatever the phrase is, because you're just going to anger your fans. And
Right.
yeah, and I think, I mean, the flip side of that too is we as fans need to understand that just because we fantasy book something and it doesn't happen, that's not the company, messing
Right.
with us or
Right. Yeah.
disappointing
I
us. That's us disappointing ourselves into something that never happened, was never going to happen.
I think WrestleMania 39 might be one of the better examples of that, the main event with Cody. But there was someone else too that I thought that, everybody was hyped up that somebody was going to, I don't remember I don't even remember if it was AEW or if it was WWE, but they, in their mind, it might have been, yeah, it was when Tony Khan was talking about,
A big
one of his
announcement.
favorites was coming in. Yeah, the big announcement, but it was before Christian Cage
Oh
came
yeah.
in. But he was talking about one of his favorites, and people jumped to the conclusion that it was John Cena
Mm,
or someone. This may have been CM Punk, the CM
yeah.
Punk time that they were talking, and then it ended up being Christian, and fans were the hardcore fans. I think were disappointed, but it's like, yeah, we as fans have to stop getting it into our mind that they're booking for us specifically. You and I are, I'm 50 and you're, in the rearview
Almost.
mirror.
Yeah.
catching up to it. So we're not the demographic, and so
Mhm.
you know, it will be interesting to see where this ride goes with Punk. The music is back, obviously. Will we get ice cream bars? That's my next big question. But they immediately, and again, this is the business side of it. The T-shirt sale,
Yeah.
WWE shop ad came up on my phone almost immediately after the show ended. So obviously, both sides know what they're doing when it comes to that. AEW does a great job with that with Pro Wrestling Tees. Whenever a new talent, when Punk came in 2 years ago, I think that shirt sold out in a matter of
Mhm.
minutes and was their best selling, and may still be their best selling shirt of all time. So it'll be interesting to sit back and kind of enjoy the ride, as they say.
Yeah. And just on a footnote, Christian coming in is one of the best signings that AEW has done. You should all respect the patriarchy, and he hopefully will not be jobbing to Adam Copeland. But no, Christian is doing probably some of the best work of his career right now. But as you also going to say, do you think if Punk hadn't gone to AEW, would he be back in WWE, or did WWE basically sign him because of the fallout with AEW,
Oh,
or
I see what you're
would
saying.
there have been any interest in bringing him back otherwise?
I don't think there would have been interest from him for starters for that.
Mm.
So, but yeah, no, I agree. I think that because I do think they kind of flirted with him back when he came back, whatever year it was, where they were doing the show on Fox.
That was Fox. Yeah, from what I had
I know it was a
read
Fox
earlier,
thing, but
Fox.
I
Yeah, they
think
said
they
Vince McMahon
were,
had. Yeah, apparently, Fox
yeah.
wanted him on to show up on SmackDown because I was on Fox, but Vince McMahon was against it. So I don't know.
I, but no,
Changing management too. Also,
yeah, I agree. I don't think, had he had the 2 years in AEW before this, he would not have shown up at Survivor Series last night. No, I
Mhm.
don't think that. Um, and I don't think that he would have wanted to, but I think that he got back into it, enjoyed the ride in AEW in terms of because there is something about being out there in front of people and performing and being able to do that. And fans obviously still, he's probably one of wrestling's more polarizing figures, but he's
Mhm.
also that side that is behind him. And again, it's that kind of cult of personality mentality. They
Mhm.
are all in with pardon the pun there too, but you know,
Well,
um,
and we've discussed this before, so I'll throw it out again. Is it? Yes, I think fans do like Punk, but is it also just because they know Punk? It's the same way if John Cena shows up, if The Rock, even if
mhm,
Hulk Hogan shows up, fans are going to go crazy for it because it's, like a term, it's a legend showing up in the business that you didn't expect. And, it may not be somebody you want to see long term, but especially if you're in the arena and that
right.
they show up, then, it's not to, uh, not to discredit them or anything, but these legends are bigger than, say, if Tozawa, I
Yeah.
think that's his name, Tozawa came out, or
Yeah.
even Otis, and I mean I think Alpha Academy has a great gimmick and they're doing good at third position in the company, but there's a difference between star power there. So yeah, I just think because um, for example, I'll go back to your good friend. If "Feed Me More" hits on the speaker, is the crowd going to go crazy for Ryback? I,
Boo.
I think we need to find out. I think,
Yes. Well, and as you were bringing that up, and
mm,
somebody will correct me, and you may correct me if I'm wrong, but I feel like Punk may be that first non WWE product that reached that legendary
mm,
status. Hulk Hogan, John Cena, Triple H, Batista, even Rick. They all Dusty, and maybe not WWE, but was not part of the big two. It wasn't part of the
mm,
NWA, wasn't part of WCW or WCW or WWE. Punk came from Ring of Honor, which back then wasn't. So he was really that first indie darling,
mm,
I think, and maybe I could be wrong, but it just feels like that kind of makes him unique in that sense as well, because while I would not put him in a class of Hulk Hogan or of Stone Cold Steve Austin, but he's definitely in the conversation of greats who have made a significant impact in pro wrestling. So,
Yeah, I mean, he and uh, Brian Danielson
yeah. Oh, definitely.
both.
I would put Brian. You know how I feel about Daniel Bryan or Brian Danielson, but uh, I, I personally like him a lot more than CM Punk. I don't know how the everyday fan would look at it though. It's interesting because I do think that had Punk not left in 2014,
Mhm.
I don't know that we would have gotten the version of Daniel Bryan that we got in WWE.
Hmm,
I could be wrong. I could be wrong about that, but that may be
it's
another case
interesting.
study that we do down the road. It's coming up on 10 years, so maybe we'll break that down in 2024. So,
All right.
Chad, anything else on your mind you want to say before we wrap things up this week?
Uh, no, I mean, we just had 2 weeks of good wrestling. Um, be being front row at AEW Full Gear. I wish you would have flown out for that and saved me from having to sit next to the person that was sitting next to me. But I got to experience that, and that was fun. And then, like I said, Survivor Series again. And we can discuss this on another show. It's just the difference between AEW and WWE. If you're looking at, if they're ice cream and you expect chocolate from both of them,
Right.
it's not going to be that way. One's going to be Rocky Road and one's going to be chocolate mint chip or whatever. It's
Yeah.
similar but different. So, and I guess, as fans, just like what you like. If you don't like something, let it go. Don't
Just
fixate on it.
just snap
Except
each
if,
other about it.
unless it's Randy Orton, then hate all you want. And but no, it's like, again, life is so much more than wrestling. Um, and this is going to be, I guess, we're getting into the holiday season where, focus on what's important, and bitching online. Yes, it's cool and it's fun to do, and that's why the internet was invented. But go outside and breathe in some fresh air every now and again.
Very well said. And as Chad said, the holiday season, don't forget to reach out to us about the My 123 Cents wrestling figure drive that is going on now, and we will gladly accept those donations. Friends, thank you so much for listening and or watching to this week's episode. We will talk again soon. Have a great week.